In my last video, I said that 2016 was the worst year in NXT since the release of the WWE Network. With that being said, NXT at its worst is still more entertaining than WWE at its... Before I begin, I'd like to give an honorable mention to Bobby Roode. He hasn't really lived up to the potential that I expected of him, but his impact on the NXT and WWE universe is no less astounding. He also had some of the best entrances of the year. As he moves into the NXT Championship scene though, I'd like to see him be less comedic and more serious like he was at his debut promo. With that out of the way, let's begin. At the bottom of the list, we have Mickie James' return at NXT Takeover Toronto. Call me hypocritical after my comments in the last video, but putting a pre-established name into the title picture works perfectly here. The entire point of this return was to put over Asuka, and that is how you book a Legend's return. I'm looking at you, WWE. I'm not going to hide my bias in this entry either. Mickie James was my favorite female on the roster when I was first introduced to wrestling, so watching her compete as opposed to Trish Stratus really drove this one home. It would have been enough to just watch her step into the ring, but she and Asuka arguably stole the show. Or at least they would have if it wasn't for you meddling kids. The psychology in this bout was great, and it could have been better if the production crew hadn't missed just about every critical part of it. We have already gotten one-off appearances from Too Cool and Jushin Thunder Liger in the past, but this particular move could once again open the door for other WWE legends to make major NXT appearances. Top it all off with Asuka finally concluding her heel turn, and you've got yourself one of the best displays of character development in NXT. But I'll talk more about that later on. I watch a lot of anime. I'm very intrigued by Japanese culture, so it's only fitting that a Japanese megastar would find his way onto my list. I've already voiced my opinion on the NXT title picture, but that's more so the fault of the creative team than the competitors themselves. Shinsuke Nakamura easily had the best debut that I've ever witnessed. From the wrestling, to the storytelling, to the crowd, to the presentation, everything was top notch. Not only is this my favorite match from 2016, but it's easily my favorite match from NXT, and quite possibly my favorite of all time. The entrance alone was breathtaking. The rest was just icing on the cake. And boy, was there an abundance of it. The only reason why Nakamura falls so low on this list is that the rest of the year was downhill from here. And before you jump to the comments, that is not me saying that Nakamura had a bad year. Quite frankly, Nakamura had an incredible year, and he at one point had me reinvested in the NXT title, if only for a few months. I use the term downhill with the utmost respect for how memorable this moment in Dallas truly was. He would not have made my top 5 if his match with Sami Zayn was followed by a year of crap. With Samoa Joe hopefully out of the picture moving forward, I am very excited to see Nakamura and Bobby Roode square off in San Antonio. Just try to move away from the two-man main event scene, please. I could spend an entire video talking about how much I enjoyed TakeOver Dallas in particular, but instead I'll use the time that I have to credit all of the amazing takeovers we had this past year. One of my major problems with the main roster is how none of their pay-per-views feel special. You're almost guaranteed a strong WrestleMania, and if you're lucky, SummerSlam will deliver as well. But nothing outside of those two venues seems memorable in the big picture. When it comes to NXT, however, you can bet your house that you'll get a spectacle out of a takeover event. The main events may not have won me over this year, but virtually everything else did. We had cool entrances, gripping storylines, innovative offense, everything that you look for in a pay-per-view, NXT had it. I can distinctly recall at least 2 matches from each takeover, whereas I probably couldn't name 5 WWE matches from 2016 that I actually remember. And this is coming from a guy who watched all of WrestleMania 32. You might have a different favorite than I do, but I think we can all agree that NXT's takeover specials were a tremendous improvement from the previous years. Part of what maintained the consistent quality of these specials was the tag team division. The takeover main events this year mostly paled in comparison to what came before them, and while the women's division fell apart halfway through the year, the tag team division has only gotten stronger. That's an incredible feat, considering this year's call-ups, but the way that those call-ups were booked in NXT definitely contributed to this surge of momentum. Samoa Joe may not have needed his second NXT title reign, but the Revival definitely deserved their accolades. They're the single greatest tag team on this planet, and they acted and were treated like it. Neither Enzo and Cass nor the American Alpha could get the better of them when all was said and done. And when you have a successful throwback like the Revival, a team that excels in tag team fundamentals, any group that steps up to face them is almost guaranteed a thrilling match. I mean, did you see that 2 out of 3 falls match in Toronto? Even now, when the Revival is about to be bumped to the main roster, there is still a strong set of factions in NXT. You've got DIY, the Authors of Pain, Sanity, and even TM61 is starting to pick up steam. Even though this year's Dusty Classic was completely floored by injuries, I enjoyed seeing TM61 and Sanity gain opportunities that they otherwise probably wouldn't have gotten. Just imagine how insane Aries and Strong versus Itami and Ibushi would have been though. WWE's Tag Team Division usually picks up for a few months and then disappears for the rest of the year. But NXT has developed a good group of guys here, and hopefully we'll see some new interesting faces join the ranks in 2017. And the single greatest aspect of NXT in 2016 was Dan Matha. I'm kidding. It was Asuka. From the moment she stepped into NXT, Asuka was gold. She's an unstoppable force looking for a challenge, and so far, she hasn't gotten it. The progression of her character is some of NXT's finest writing. When Asuka first came into NXT, the division was ripe with capable fighters. In 2015, Asuka quickly knocked out Dana Brooke and Emma before jumping straight into the 2016 title hunt. After she crushed Bayley in Dallas, there was this brief moment where Asuka looked back at her broken opponent and realized that she had just dethroned the best. After that, Asuka's self-confidence grew exponentially to the point where she openly declared that nobody is ready for Asuka. And she was absolutely right. I know that I ragged on the women's division last time for how barren it was, but I can appreciate the mix of form and function here. When Asuka made that statement, it was believable. There was no one left in NXT to fight Asuka, which is why an outsider like Mickie James had to step in. The seeds of Asuka's heel turn were perfectly placed back in Dallas, and we finally got the payoff in Toronto. To us, it seemed like Asuka was disrespecting Mickie by refusing to shake her hand. But to Asuka, Mickie James didn't give her the challenge that she was looking for. Why should she shake hands with someone who isn't on her level? The Asuka we saw in Brooklyn and the Asuka we saw in Toronto were two completely different beasts. Asuka's too deadly for her own good, and the result is that no one can touch her or her championship. In the meantime, a new moon has risen in the background, and the embers of a great fire are about to burn. I'm not sure how NXT will handle Asuka's first loss, but I have a feeling that we're not too far from it. Thank you all for watching. If you haven't already seen part 1, you can click the card on the right. And if you're interested in another 2016 list video that I recently made, you can click the card on the left. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to share it with your friends. And if you'd like to hear more of my daily ramblings, you can follow me on Twitter at MathWiz97x. Until next time, keep on YouTubing.